Good morning, welcome back to another video, and today is the weekly highlight. Now just stick around and enjoy the video. Okay, so today we are going to be going over Inscription. Now this one is based for Shadowlands, and this is all of the stuff I have managed to dig up on all of the relevant websites. A lot of data mining has been done on a lot of the professions, and a lot of stuff hasn't been actually fully fleshed out yet on some of the other professions, but the majority of the one is my favorite profession, Inscription. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over the reagents that are going to be used within Inscription, along with items of note that you should be crafting as soon as Shadowlands hits, and following onto that, all of the other items that will be coming along with the Inscription in Shadowlands thus far. This is up to date at this moment in time. There will be subject to change elements involved within this, and we should probably see some really nice developments going forward. So aside from that, let's get into the reagents. Now coming in for the reagents for Inscription in Shadowlands is luminous ink, which comes from luminous pigment, along with umbral ink, which comes from umbral pigment, and tranquil ink, which is our uncommon ink, which comes from tranquil pigment. The other reagent of note is dark parchment, which is the new parchment that you're going to be using for your Inscription within Shadowlands. The next things that I would, however, like to say and suggest is it kind of is going on from the same ones from BFA, which means that there is a blue, red and green inks. Now, for obvious reasons, the tranquil ink is the uncommon one, which seems to be going along the same lines as a viridescent ink within BFA. That means that it's probably going to have a lot lower drop chance from mass milling and or just milling in general, and is primarily going to be one of the most expensive inks to get a hold of moving into Shadowlands. Now, the next one is umbral ink, and that one seems to be the new ultramarine ink, as well as the same colour as it has, as ultramarine ink has. It's generally looking to be more along the lines of ultramarine ink, so it's going to be our fairly common one, the one that we're going to have mass tons of in our guild banks, and believe me, I have a lot of ultramarine ink, so I am very well versed when it comes to having mass amounts of inks in my guild bank. Now, the next one is luminous ink, which is our red one, and that one is going to go along the same lines as crimson ink. Now, that being the case, this one's going to have a lower mill chance than the umbral ink, and it'll be our midway ink, which is going to be roughly a decent amount of gold, and you're probably going to make a decent amount moving forward if you were to just mass mill this within Shadowlands and then just sell the inks on the auction house. As we've seen with crimson ink, it's still very viable. It just depends on how much the herbs are actually going to be going for. Now obviously we don't have the mill rates just yet for these different types of inks, but we can make an assumption based off of what we actually know that the tranquil ink is going to be our most highly prized one, and then it's going to go into our luminous ink and then our umbral ink. So that being the case, the dark parchment is looking like something we're going to have to be just buying flat from a vendor. So that's pretty damn good. It's just one of those side notey ones. So that being the case, that is the reagents thus far for Inscription. So henceforth, let's just get into the items of note. The items of note go as follows. We have the Codex of Still Mind. Now this one's going to be the same as all of the other codexes, but this one's going to be the Shadowlands specific one, and it currently has a crafting cost of 5 luminous ink, 5 umbral ink, and 1 tranquil ink, along with 75 dark parchment. Now looking at this is going to be considered probably the same way as we looked in Shadowlands for the other codexes, and goes as follows to say that it's most likely going to be one of those highly crafted ones moving forward. So it's something you should probably keep an eye on when Shadowlands hits. Moving on to this is the Tome of the Still Mind, and like all of the tomes, these ones are going to be the super fast selling highly profitable ones, and that's going to actually cost us 3 luminous ink along with 3 umbral ink and 25 dark parchment. So that being the case, these ones are going to be relatively cheap quotations to actually craft. Now that means that with our mass milling we can then probably use that to actually produce cheaper inks, and then therefore we're going to be able to boom, do the Tomes of the Still Mind. Now this one is something that I would highly suggest everyone just gets on like immediately when it comes to when Shadowlands hits, because people are going to be wanting to use these tomes, because tomes are used quite frequently, and even now the Legion ones and the BFA ones are still selling fairly well. Even though one of them's older than the other, they're still bought and the profit margins are still roughly the same. So looking at those two, we can get a strong idea that the Tome of the Still Mind is still going to sell relatively rapidly, and hopefully if we can get hold of these inks in a fairly reasonable way, then that means we're going to be able to craft these for a pretty big profit on most realms. So that's something that of note right there. Now the next thing of note for the items of note is the Vantus rune. Now I'm very big on Vantus runes. That's because they pull in a lot of gold and they have a lot of profit. Now this one is for the Vantus rune of Castle Nathria. Oh, now that one is going to cost us and now that one's going to actually cost us 10 luminous ink, 10 umbral ink, 1 tranquil ink, and 1 dark parchment. So this one's going to be fairly easy to craft, judging by this. And at the end of the day, Vantus runes will usually sell at the beginning of the opening of the first raid. Is definitely going to be something that we're going to be like, everyone's going to buy. Usually sell really fast off of the auction house, and it is something of note because Vantus runes are always selling really fast. These ones are relatively cheap. The only one that's going to actually take us a little bit longer to get a hold of those different types of inks, or cost us the most, is the tranquil ink, judging by what we've looked at with the reagents. So overall, this one's definitely something to keep an eye on and get a hold of as soon as possible. Hopefully we're able to get a hold of this by doing LFR, and then therefore we can then get on to gold making with that. So that being the case, that is pretty damn good. Now the next thing of note is the Word of Power 4. Now why did I pick the Word of Power 4? Well, this is the epic item that is used in a load of other different types of crafts. Now this Word of Power 4 will actually give us 20 eye level more when it's crafted into something else as an optional reagent for other professions. So say you're a blacksmith and you use the Word of Power 4 in crafting, I don't know, some bracers. Now that's going to actually give us plus 20 eye level for this. So this is definitely something other crafters will want to use. So such as blacksmithing, leatherworking, tailoring, they're all going to be wanting these and making their gear as high item level as possible to get the better sales for that item. It just makes sense, right? Now that being the case, it's actually going to cost us a fair amount of inks to actually craft. So this is something to watch as well as have as an item of note. Believe me, I will be crafting a hell of a ton of these. I'm looking at investing around about over 1 million gold when Shadowlands actually hits for Inscription alone. And judging by this, it's going to cost us around about 100 luminous ink, 100 umbral ink, along with 20 tranquil ink, ouch, and then 1 dark parchment, which, yeah, 1 dark parchment's not going to be the least of our worries. The tranquil ink and the luminous ink is probably going to be the ones that are going to drive us round the bend. But other than that, that is pretty damn good. It's just something to watch. It's going to be costing us a lot to craft. Looking at how much the reagents for this one's going to actually cost. So bear in mind that's going to be something that we're going to have to look into moving forward. Now, the next thing of note is glyphs. Glyphs. Now, there are placeholder glyphs at this moment in time, which is like Glyph of the Dolphin, Glyph of the Humble Flyer, and Glyph of the Tide Skipper. Now, going by the names of these ones, we already know these ones because these ones are already in BFA. These ones are just placed as placeholders at this moment in time, but we do have an inkling on how much these glyphs are going to cost. We're going to have one for pretty much every class, looking at what we've had to see or been mined, and basically it's going to cost us 5 luminous ink, 5 umbral ink, and 1 dark parchment to create one of these glyphs. Now, for obvious reasons, that means that glyphs are going to be fairly easy to craft, like always. It just depends on the volume that you can pump out of multiple different types of glyphs. So, nice addition, loads of new glyphs being added. That is pretty damn awesome, and it gives us a more variety to give out to everyone. And glyphs are definitely going to be in high demand, especially the Shadowlands ones, as Shadowlands hits, because everyone's going to want to try them out, see if they're worth it or not. So, that being the case, we're going to leave it at there because glyphs aren't fully fleshed out just yet, so I may just have to do a follow-up video on another highlight to actually highlight the glyphs once they've actually all come through and not have the placeholders for BFA. The next ones are contracts. Now, contracts obviously will sell like hotcakes at the beginning of the first year of an X pack. That is because everyone wants their reps, right? This is definitely an item of note, or items of note, and would recommend moving forward. Now, all of these contracts, the ones for Ardenweald, Bastion, Maldraxxus, and Ravendreth, are all going to cost us 5 luminous ink, 5 umbral ink, and 1 dark parchment. So the same as the glyphs. So what I'm looking at right now is they're going to cost us at least a little bit less gold to actually craft. So that means that they may be dropping slightly in price, but don't fret, as we'll probably still see a huge demand for these glyphs. So the more volume we can actually sell, that means the more gold we're actually going to make. So that being the case, these new contracts are definitely something to actually watch. I'm pretty much going to be making sure that I've got all of them. Well, every item of note that we're specifying right now, I'm going to be getting a hold of. And that being the case, let's move on to Dark Moon cards. Now, Dark Moon cards at this moment in time have a few placeholders on them, but we do have the names. We have the Dark Moon card of Death, Putrescence, Repose, Indomitable, and Voracity. Now, these ones are going to be the new Dark Moon cards, but we also have how much they're actually going to craft. So that being the case, let's state how many they're going to actually cost. And that is 7 luminous ink, 7 umbral ink, and 1 tranquil ink. So these ones are going to be fairly easy to actually craft. They're going to cost a little bit more to make than the contracts and the glyphs. Understandable they are, because they're going to be used to make the high item level trinkets, which we're actually going to sell for a hell of a lot more gold at the beginning of an expansion. If you look at all of the Dark Moon cards at the beginning of every X pack, they go for crazy amounts of gold. So something of note always is the Dark Moon trinkets and the Dark Moon cards in general. And for obvious reasons, this is something that everyone should just get on immediately if you have the ability to. I would urge you to actually double down on it, so as soon as the Dark Moon Fair is up, when Shadowlands hits, get on it, get those Dark Moon cards as fast as possible, and then just start crafting like crazy. I'm already writing up an attack plan on how I'm going to do this with Inscription. It's really fun. So other than that, Dark Moon cards, definitely a must watch, and I would highly recommend crafting them. Now, the other items of note before we end this video, and that is the Deathbound Codex, which is an offhand weapon. We also have the Redeemer's Column and the Redeemer's Spire. These ones are going to be the high item level crafts for Inscription. And then we also have the other ones, such as the Word of Power 1 to 3. So you have Word of Power 1, Word of Power 2, Word of Power 3, and then we get to the awesome one that you have to craft, which is number 4. The other ones, obviously, you can craft hell of a lot of these because not a lot of people would be able to afford that many. But for obvious reasons, these ones may be worth crafting. If so, the Word of Power 4 is really, really hard to actually craft. So if you are someone who doesn't have a lot of time to actually set it up for the Word of Power 4, so you could always go for a subsidiary one to actually tide you over with some steady profit coming in. Now the next things of the other items is the Rite of Grave Robbing. This is going to be the same as all of the other rites and pretty much does the exact same thing. It's just a lockpicking thing. So not a big overall amazing thing. It's just one of those new lockpick things that you can actually craft. So maybe worth like shoving 20 on the auction house when Shadowlands hits and seeing what happens. It's just worth it to just craft a few and then just see how well they sell and just restock them every now and then. They're not like a major thing that you should really keep an eye on. It's just like, oh, I've run out, I'll just restock them. But aside from that, we also have the lowest tier weapon, which is usually a staff, and that is the Soul Keeper's column, which is probably going to be completely useless when you actually craft it, as at the moment it's just a green item, and to be honest, everyone just skips past these ones and they go for the high item level ones. So realistically, if you're going to craft the staffs when it comes to Inscription in Shadowlands, go for the high item level ones and don't craft the Soul Keeper's column because it's just going to be completely worthless. Now, aside from all of that, that is my overview for Inscription for Shadowlands for the weekly highlight. Have an awesome rest of the day, and I shall see you on the Discord, which I'm pretty much on all the time. Other than that, guys, have an awesome rest of the day, and I shall see you in the next video, which will be tomorrow.